It was 2:17 in the morning when Ryan Mercer first heard the voice on the radio. He was driving through the Arizona desert, somewhere outside Flagstaff, on a stretch of Route 66 that felt like it had been forgotten by the world. The kind of road where you don't see another car for hours, where the darkness is so thick it feels like you could reach out and touch it. Ryan was a freelance photographer, but lately he'd been picking up rideshare shifts just to pay the bills. Tonight, though, he was alone. Just him, the endless asphalt, and the static hiss of the AM dial as he searched for something, anything, to keep him awake. That's when the voice cut through the noise.
Clear. Call.
Deliberate. Ryan, it said, don't look in your rearview mirror. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. For a second, he thought he'd imagined it. Maybe he was more tired than he realized. But then the voice spoke again. I know you want to look, but trust me. Not yet. Ryan's heart started pounding. He glanced at the radio display. No station ID, no frequency number, just a blank screen and that smooth, almost friendly voice coming through the speakers. He laughed nervously, trying to shake it off. Late night radio pranks, right? Some shock jock messing with people. But then the voice said something that made his blood run cold. You remember that summer in Ohio, don't you, Ryan? When you and Ellie broke the porch swing. You told your parents it was the wind. Nobody knew that story. Nobody except him and Ellie. And Ellie had been dead for 3 years. Ryan's foot eased off the gas pedal. The car slowed to 60, then 50. The desert stretched out on both sides of him, endless and empty under a sky full of stars that somehow made everything feel even more alone. He reached for the radio dial, twisting it left and right, trying to find that station again. But there was nothing, just static, just the sound of white noise filling the car like invisible snow. He kept driving, told himself he was overtired. That grief does strange things to your mind, especially at 2 in the morning in the middle of nowhere. But his hands were shaking. He finally looked in the rearview mirror. The road behind him was empty, just darkness and the faint red glow of his own taillights reflecting off the asphalt. Nothing else. He exhaled slowly and turned the radio off. The silence that followed felt even worse. Ryan drove for another hour before pulling into a gas station on the edge of Flagstaff. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he filled his tank, and everything felt normal again. Real. Solid. He grabbed a coffee inside, nodded at the tired clerk behind the counter, and told himself he'd just been hearing things. But when he got back in his car and turned the key, the radio came on by itself, and the voice was waiting. You made it home safe, Ryan. That's good. We'll talk again soon. Ryan didn't drive that route again for 3 days. He picked up shifts in town, stayed busy, tried not to think about it. But curiosity is a strange thing. It eats at you. On the 4th night, he found himself back on Route 66, heading east out of Flagstaff around midnight. He told himself he was just testing it, proving to himself that it had been nothing. The radio stayed off until he hit the same stretch of highway where it had happened before. Then, like clockwork, the static cleared. Hello again, Ryan. The voice was calm, almost warm, like an old friend calling to check in. Ryan's throat went dry. Who is this? He said out loud, knowing it was pointless. The radio couldn't hear him, but the voice responded anyway. You can call me the broadcaster, and I'm here to help you, Ryan. In fact, I'm about to save your life. Ryan's hands tightened on the wheel. What are you talking about? Slow down, the voice said. There's a deer around the bend. If you don't brake now, you'll hit it at 70 miles per hour. You'll flip. You won't survive. Ryan's heart hammered in his chest. Every instinct told him this was insane, but his foot moved to the brake anyway. The car slowed, and then, just as his headlights swept around the curve, a massive mule deer stepped into the road. It froze in the glare, eyes glowing green. Ryan stopped the car 10 feet away. The deer stared at him for a long moment, then bounded off into the darkness. Ryan sat there, hands trembling, breath coming in short gasps. The voice came through the speakers again. "See, I told you. I'm here to help." After that night, Ryan couldn't stay away. Every time he drove that highway, the broadcaster was there. Always at the same time. Always in the same dead zone where no other stations could reach. And every time, the voice warned him about something. Small things. Immediate things. "Your left front tire is about to blow. Pull over now." Ryan pulled over. 2 minutes later, the tire exploded. "Don't pick up the hitchhiker at mile marker 47. Ryan saw him. A man standing on the side of the road in the dark, thumb out. Something about him felt wrong. Ryan drove past. In his rearview mirror, the man didn't move. Didn't even turn his head. Just stood there, watching the taillights disappear. The warnings were always right. Always helpful. And that's what made it so much worse. Because Ryan started to realize something. The broadcaster wasn't guessing. It knew. It knew things that hadn't happened yet. It knew things about Ryan's life that nobody should know. One night, as Ryan drove through the desert, the voice came through as usual. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a description. Ryan is alone in his car right now. He's thinking about his sister. He's wondering if I'm really her, trying to reach him from wherever she is. Ryan's eyes burned with tears. "Ellie?" he whispered, but the voice didn't answer. Instead, it said something that made his skin crawl. Ryan's apartment is empty right now. The lights are off, but the bathroom door just opened, and now the hallway light is turning on.
1, 2,
3. Ryan's blood turned to ice. His apartment. He lived alone. He'd locked the door. He was 40 minutes away. "Who's in my apartment?" he said, voice shaking. The broadcaster paused. Then, almost gently, it said, "You should go home, Ryan. See for yourself." Ryan broke every speed limit getting back to Flagstaff. He pulled into his apartment complex, tires screeching, and sprinted up the stairs to his second-floor unit. The door was still locked. The deadbolts still turned. Inside, everything looked normal. Lights off. Everything in its place. He checked every room. The bathroom. The closets. The kitchen. Nothing. But when he walked into the bathroom, he noticed something. The mirror was tilted. Just slightly. Like someone had bumped it. Or touched it. Ryan stood there staring at his own reflection, heart pounding. He lived alone. He always left the mirror straight. He reached out and adjusted it, then backed out of the room slowly. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat on his couch with all the lights on, staring at the front door. And at 3:33 in the morning, his kitchen radio turned on by itself. Just static at first. Then the voice. "You found it, didn't you?" The mirror. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. "What do you want from me?" The voice didn't answer. It just hummed that low electrical hum, like something breathing through the speakers. Then it clicked off. The next night, Ryan drove the highway again. He had to. He needed answers. And the broadcaster was waiting. But this time, something was different. This time, the voice wasn't just warning him. It was narrating. Ryan is checking his rearview mirror now. Ryan's eyes flicked to the mirror. Ryan is realizing there's a car behind him with no headlights. Ryan's stomach dropped. There was a truck behind him.
big, black, old.
And its lights were off. Ryan is locking the doors. Ryan's hand moved on its own, pressing the lock button. The truck stayed exactly 3 car lengths back. No matter how fast Ryan drove, no matter how many times he changed lanes or slowed down, it just followed. Silent, patient, invisible except for its dark shape cutting through the night. Ryan's mind raced. He thought about speeding up, running, but something told him that wouldn't work. The broadcaster knew everything. It had known the deer was coming, known about the tire, known about his apartment. It was always 3 steps ahead. So Ryan made a decision. He pulled off onto an abandoned rest stop, one of those old Route 66 relics that hadn't been used in 20 years. Cracked concrete, rusted picnic tables, weeds growing through the parking lot. The truck pulled in behind him. Ryan sat there, engine running, watching in his mirrors. The truck's engine idled, rumbling. The radio came on by itself, and this time the broadcaster's voice sounded different, strained, almost urgent. "You weren't supposed to stop, Ryan." "What do you want?" Ryan shouted at the radio. "Why are you doing this?" Silence. Then, slowly, the truck's door opened. Ryan held his breath, but nobody stepped out. The door just hung open.
Empty. Dark.
And then the radio shifted. The static changed, and a new voice came through. A voice Ryan hadn't heard in 3 years. "Ryan." It was Ellie, his little sister, the one who died in a car accident on a rainy highway in Ohio, the one he still dreamed about, the one he still blamed himself for not being there to save. "Ellie?" Ryan's voice cracked. Tears streamed down his face. "Ryan, you have to understand," Ellie's voice said, crackling through the static. "He only exists when you're alone. He's been following you since I died. Waiting, watching, learning. Who? Who's been following me?" But before Ellie could answer, the truck's engine shut off. Complete silence. The kind of silence that presses on your eardrums. Ryan's hands were shaking so badly he could barely open his door. He stepped out into the cold desert air. The truck sat there, 20 feet away, driver's door still open.
Empty.
Ryan walked toward it slowly. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he had to know. He had to see. When he reached the truck, he looked inside. The driver's seat was empty, but it was warm, like someone had just been sitting there. And on the dashboard, illuminated by the faint glow of the parking lot lights, was an old handheld radio scanner, the kind from the 80s, plastic, worn, and it was on. Static poured from its tiny speaker, and then, from deep inside that static, Ryan heard his own voice, whispering, "Don't look behind you." Every muscle in Ryan's body locked up. His own voice, coming from the radio, telling him not to look, but he could feel it. Something behind him, breathing, waiting, close enough to touch. He didn't look. Instead, he ran, sprinted back to his car, threw himself inside, and slammed the door. His hands fumbled with the keys. The engine roared to life. He floored it. The tires screamed as he tore out of the rest stop and back onto the highway. In his rearview mirror, the truck didn't follow. It just sat there, door still open, radio still crackling. Ryan drove 90 miles an hour all the way back to Flagstaff. He didn't slow down, didn't look back, and he swore right then and there that he would never drive that road again. The next morning, he went back to the rest stop, in daylight, with a friend, but there was nothing there. No truck, no tire tracks. The pavement was covered in dust and sand, undisturbed, like nothing had been there in years. His friend thought he'd had a breakdown. Too much stress, too much grief. Ryan didn't argue. He just nodded and went home. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that something had followed him back. 3 weeks passed. Ryan stopped driving at night, stopped listening to the radio. He stayed in town, picked up local shifts, and tried to convince himself it was over, that whatever had been out there in the desert, it had stayed there. He was almost starting to believe it. Then, one evening, he was making coffee in his apartment. The sun was setting outside. Orange light filtered through the blinds. Everything felt normal, safe. And then his kitchen radio turned on by itself. Ryan froze, coffee mug halfway to his lips. Static. That familiar, crackling static. And then the voice. Ryan isn't in the desert anymore. A pause. Long enough for Ryan's heart to stop. He's in the apartment. The bathroom door at the end of the hallway slowly creaked open. Ryan's mug slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The voice continued, calm and measured. Ryan is realizing now that the station was never tied to the highway. It was tied to isolation, to being alone. And now that I don't need the desert to reach him anymore, Ryan finally understands something important. The hallway light flickered. The signal was never coming from a tower. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the bathroom. It was coming from somewhere much closer. Ryan backed against the kitchen counter. His phone was in the bedroom. The front door was 15 feet away, but his legs wouldn't move. The footsteps stopped, right at the edge of the hallway, just out of sight, and the voice came through one last time, barely a whisper. As the static filled the apartment, Ryan finally understood. The silence between radio stations isn't empty. Something lives there, and now it's here.